Hello and welcome to another WAB-ART production featuring a painting by Sophie Gervais, French-Canadian artist, and this one is entitled Which Door Will You Take? I've deliberately chosen this painting because it reflects something about Anton Bruckner, and that is the subject of structure, form and architecture. If you look at sleeve notes to the old vinyl LPs or compact discs, or even from looking at information on Anton Bruckner on the internet, you'll invariably come across talk of his symphonies being like monumental sound blocks, architecture, cathedrals in sound, and so on. I feel this picture clearly illustrates more than would first appear, just as Anton Bruckner, as composer, man and artist, also do, far beyond what they would first appear. If we take the door on the left to be that of Bruckner's early life and the option of stepping into the door of being a schoolmaster, which would come with that middle path of supplementing his income, spending many hours working the fields, because at the time of Bruckner's life a school teacher was poorly paid and not held in high regard. You also have the right path, which offers several opportunities. Again, Bruckner could have been this great virtuoso organist, and he certainly was praised for his improvisations. Looking at the organ, and I'm not a musician, so I'm not talking from experience, just from what I've observed, with a church or cathedral organ, you have what are called terraces with various keyboards in different registers. You also have to the side the various stops, and then you have the foot pedals. So I would imagine as a musician, to play the organ would be very physically as well as mentally exhausting. But where does this whole idea of structure originate with Bruckner? If we turn to his early life, he was assisting his father until his father's early departure from this world as assistant school teacher, assisting him with playing the organ and improvisations in the church. And I feel early on in Bruckner's life, he knew he was very different. In today's world, he would probably be labelled negatively as being with some form of autism. But I feel Bruckner knew this, and so the first architecture that you will find in Bruckner, the first structure, is to examine his life as a whole, and you'll see that around the age of 40 to 42, he went through an entire musical training which he could back up with qualifications. Therefore, he is building a solid foundation on which to build. So the architecture and the blocks of sound merely reflect this. And you have to wonder, with any artist, when you look at their lives, some of the hardships that they went to, and ask yourself, why would somebody take that path? Unless there was something so compelling, some message for humanity that they wished to share. And I feel this is the case with Bruckner himself. So he took a particularly difficult route, and the structure, I refer you to the playlist called Symphonic Analysis, Discovering Music, Bruckner's 6th and 9th Symphony. It's a BBC Radio 3 recording with Stephen Johnson, and using, I think it's one of the BBC orchestras to illustrate the musical points. And you'll see that the structure in Bruckner's symphonies are modelled on Beethoven's Eroica. There is something very consistent with Bruckner in that he will find a blueprint and he will stick to it. He is totally a respecter of the structure of authority and works within the bounds of that. You also have Bruckner the man, which is very rigid and very structured. Within the man is Bruckner the creative genius and the artist, the composer, that is almost a complete opposite. Very daring, very pioneering in the way, how he develops the symphony. And it's almost a contradiction in polarities between Bruckner the man and Bruckner the music. But I feel we need to take both as a whole, and then what are described as some oddities and peculiarities, particularly in the English-speaking world, associated with Bruckner, then start to make a lot more sense as a cohesive whole. The so-called counting neurosis, the obsession with corpses. There is far more to it than the superficial level that most people will point to. The counting neurosis. Very few people have had a look at the symphonies in particular and notice how Bruckner is very meticulous at numbering the bars, numbering each folio of an orchestral score. Numbers clearly held a lot more to Bruckner, and I feel it is also partly the way his mind operated, how he could improvise on an organ, and he'd be playing that organ and probably thinking ahead to where he's going to take the theme next, whether to slow it down, to speed it up, to modify it. And then, of course, you have all the resolution and the coda, particularly with the symphonies, where he goes through this meandering path, exploring every possibility. And I feel that's also reflected to some degree in his compositions outside the symphonies. You get little tasters of what could have been, how he could have been a composer of songs or chamber music or piano pieces. But the message he wanted to convey to humanity resides in the symphonies themselves. So that's just a little introduction in looking at Bruckner in terms of architecture and structure. The video's gone on a little bit longer than I anticipated, but all I will say is enjoy the music and may you get something out of it. May the message that Bruckner is trying to convey be imparted to you. I will go further into this in future videos, looking at the metaphysical aspects, the mystical side of Bruckner, and of course the message that he is trying to communicate to humanity itself. Thank you very much.